Hello and welcome to season 2 of the UnderReported podcast. I am Melanie, your reporter. And on this podcast, I share stories of crimes committed against Black women and Black girls because they are underreported in the media. The format of the episodes this season is that I'm going to be sharing the story with you, the audience, and I will also be sharing it with a guest that I've brought to the studio. And so today I'm going to share the story with none other than my husband. What's your name?
Gooseby. How y'all doing?
So I'll be sharing this story with Greg, my husband. And so, Greg, listen, okay? You have to be the voice of the people. I'm going to be telling you the story and the audience, but you have to be their voice. You have to chime in. You have to ask questions, react, do everything to make sure that it's a full story and that anything that they are thinking, you are thinking and saying out loud. You got it?
Will do.
All right. So a part of the intro, I say that crimes committed against Black women and girls are underreported in the media. And the story I'm going to tell you about today is an example of what can happen when those crimes and those cases go underreported. When tragic and violent stories aren't given the proper attention that they are needed in the media, people in the community can live their life completely unaware of the dangers that some people may pose to them. They don't know that what may seem like an innocent encounter could actually lead to a harmful and at worst deadly end. So stay tuned to hear how two unsuspecting families crossed paths in the worst possible way. These are the underreported stories of Typhenie Johnson and Taalibah Island. It's October 2015, and Typhenie Johnson and her fraternal twin brother, Asher Johnson, have been living together for about 1 year in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. Typhenie has just annoyingly learned that her man is also somebody else's man. Basically, he was cheating on her and she met the woman that he's cheating on her with. So annoying is probably like putting it lightly because like, girl, your man is my man. That's a problem. She was obviously heartbroken, infuriated, all the emotions that you can imagine.
Do we have the age of the young lady?
Of Typhenie? She's 25.
And fraternal twins means?
Her twin brother, they're not identical. They don't look exactly alike.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. So according to an article written in 2020 by Alexandria Cronin, the other woman that was dating Typhenie's man ends up dumping him, and then Typhenie and the girl actually like become friendly with each other. They're like cordial. So cordial, in fact, that the woman, the other woman, decides to play matchmaker and introduces Typhenie to her brother. His name is Christopher. So she's like, I know like we had the same man, but like you should date my brother. His name is Christopher.
Well, okay. Hold on. The girl that her boyfriend was having the affair with, they become friends.
They become cordial after they realize that he was playing both of them. So they're like, we're done with him. And they become friendly.
And then she says, you'll be a good match for my
Exactly.
brother.
She just playing matchmaker. Okay, so homegirl must have been onto something because 25-year-old Typhenie and the woman's brother, again, his name is Christopher, and he's 32, they end up hitting it off. They're like a couple. Despite Christopher being fresh out of jail after having served 3 years for burglary with the intent to commit assault, Typhenie and Christopher are dating and things are going surprisingly well. So well, in fact, that the two of them start living together. So at first, the two live with Typhenie's mom for a few months. And then by late May, early June, and remember they had gotten together, it was around October-ish. And so now we're into the new year. It's May, early June. And the two of them have moved back in with Asher, who is, again, Typhenie's twin brother. And remember at the beginning, I said that she had lived with her brother. So it's not really clear why when they got together, they lived with her mother. But that's what the reports that I could find said. They lived with her mother, and then they moved in with Asher, her twin. So by the time that they are living with Asher, the brother, things are not going as well as they were, right? The honeymoon phase, they've been together for a while, things aren't going as great as they were originally. Asher, her brother, reportedly witnessed Christopher being, quote, jealous, controlling, and aggressive, and that Typhenie would be constantly crying because of him. So around August of 2016, Typhenie has apparently had enough of Christopher because the two of them officially like break up. He moves out, he being Christopher, moves out of the apartment. And in that same month, Asher's girlfriend, whose name is Jessica Smith, moves in. Now, Jessica, Asher's girlfriend, moving in doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Chris moves out, but she becomes a key kind of player in the story. So it's important to just introduce the fact that she is now living there and Chris has moved out.
Okay, Asher is the fraternal twin brother.
Exactly.
And his girlfriend moves in.
Jessica has moved in. Yep.
Okay.
And Chris, who is Tiffany's boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend at this point, has moved out.
Got a lot going on.
Okay. Even after the breakup, according to both Asher and Jessica, Chris, the ex-boyfriend, was still coming over, but it wasn't to see Typhenie. It was actually because Chris and Asher, the twin brother, had developed a bit of a friendship. Remember, he was like living in the house, so he got cool with the brother, so they're kind of friendly. And even though they're breaking up, he's still coming over to hang out with Asher. So according to everything I read, yes?
Who does this? If you have an issue with my brother, I'm going to have an issue with you.
Sure.
I'm not, even if we are friends, you're not about to be coming to the house where my brother lives or my sister lives.
Sure.
These are some friendly people.
So according to everything I read, it seems that Christopher is coming over, and he's coming over pretty frequently. And Typhenie, I guess to your point, in an effort to avoid interacting with Chris because it's awkward and uncomfortable, he's my ex, like, why is he still here? And so in an effort to avoid having to interact with him, she would like conveniently not be home, or she would like position herself on the other side of the house, or she would just stay in her room so that she didn't have to interact with him. So Typhenie was pretty clear that the relationship is over, and her actions were consistent with, like, she wasn't like leading him on, like, oh yeah, I want to like still hang out with you. She's like, no, this is over. You're coming over to see my brother. Like, I want to stay away from you. Christopher, on the other hand, when he's coming over, he's asking Asher questions about Typhenie. So he's like very clearly still interested, to the point he's asking if Typhenie is, quote, cheating on him. So those are the kind of questions that he's asking her brother. So let's fast forward to October 10th, 2016. It's been a few months since the breakup because they broke up in about August. Okay. And Typhenie has a new boo because she has moved on. So she has a new boo named Russell Brown. Okay. Now, Typhenie and Russell aren't like official. They're just like talking, hanging out, kind of getting to know each other. They're enjoying each other's company. And Typhenie has planned a dinner date at the house on October 10th for Russell. So she's like, you should come over. We're going to hang out. I'm going to cook dinner. It's going to be a whole situation.
This is a disaster.
So Typhenie races home after work. She changes out of her work clothes and begins preparing her at-home dinner date for Russell. She's chatting away with Jessica, who again is her brother's girlfriend, and they're together kind of like talking, chatting it up. She's preparing the meal. When all of a sudden there's a knock at the door.
Guess who?
But it's not the guest that they were expecting. Instead of it being Russell, it's Chris. And his visit was not what Typhenie was expecting. So Chris walks in and he has a 6-pack of beer and some shots that he got from the corner store. He came to hang out. Typhenie and Jessica are both terrified and confused as to why Chris has shown up at the house. I've seen some mixed reporting on why exactly Chris came over that night. The court documents that I read said that it was to watch Monday Night Football with Asher. And then other reports that I saw say that he came over to pick some of the items that he had left after the breakup, which again is a little bit weird because it's October. They broke up in August. If he's been coming over frequently throughout those months, you would think all of his items would be gone. But that's just what I read and wanted to call out kind of the discrepancy between the court document and some of the articles. Regardless of the reason, Typhenie and Jessica have to come up with a plan because the last thing they want is for Chris to be over when Russell comes over for his dinner date.
Is Asher home?
And Asher's home. So Chris, with all of his shots and his beer, he comes in and he kind of settles himself in the house. He puts the drinks down and then he goes to the balcony to smoke a cigarette, which creates the perfect opportunity for Jessica and Typhenie to pull Asher aside to ask, yo, why is he here? What the heck is going on? Asher says he tells them he didn't know Russell was coming, which doesn't really help because at this point he's here. So like, what are we going to do? And so, again, I've seen some mixed reporting about what exactly happens next and the order of events in which they happen. So I'll share kind of both. One version of events is that Typhenie tells everyone kind of in the house, including Chris, that she's going to make a store run. And it really was like to act as a cover. She was going to try to intercept Russell before he kind of makes it. So she's like, I'll be back. I'm just going to run to the store, really to kind of catch Russell. And when she tries, so she goes downstairs and gets in her car. And when she tries to back out of her parking spot, she realizes that her car isn't working. It's not turning on. So she's frustrated. She gets out of the car. And remember, Chris is on the balcony smoking a cigarette. And so according to this particular report, he's watching from above, and then he comes downstairs because he sees her struggling. Okay. The other version of kind of that part of the story.
Let me pause you.
Yeah.
What year is this?
This is 2016.
So they're cell phones.
Sure.
So she can't just go ahead and text Russell to say, hey, don't come over or I'm going to meet you somewhere else?
I don't know. I've never seen any reports that call out her texting. It just says that she kind of goes downstairs and she's going to intercept. And again, that is just one version of what happens in that, what happens at that point.
Okay.
So the other articles that I've read say that she doesn't go outside for a store run. Instead, her and Chris go outside together. Basically, it's for her to tell him again that it's like really over, and actually according to that article, when she walks out with Chris, she doesn't even grab her shoes because she's really just kind of going out there to be like, yo, like it's really over. You should stop coming over here. Like kind of reinforcing her intentions and what's going on between the two of them. Regardless of what exactly happens between those two versions, I'm not sure. But regardless of what happens, Chris and Typhenie both wind up downstairs talking. Asher, her twin, maybe out of concern, maybe out of intrigue, or maybe a hunch, starts monitoring the two of them through the balcony window. So he's kind of peeking to see what exactly is going downstairs.
He shouldn't be showing concern now.
Well,
He having this guy over the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, fair. So according to court docs, Asher hears and sees that things have gotten pretty loudly between the two of them, but he can't exactly make out what they're saying. He just can kind of hear, right, that they are being loud. So he continues to keep watch. And at one point, he specifically makes out that Typhenie is telling Chris to just go, just leave already. And she's using her hand motions, but Chris is not leaving. So while they are talking outside, Russell makes it over, okay? Because he doesn't know what's going on. So Typhenie tells him when he kind of pulls up to go upstairs and that she'll be up in a second. He goes upstairs and he joins Asher and Jessica in monitoring the two of them downstairs. So they're all together now watching Typhenie and Chris from the balcony window.
Okay.
About 15 to 20 minutes of the two after they have been downstairs. So they've been downstairs for 15 to 20 minutes. That's a better way to say that. Typhenie and Chris move their conversation to the side of the building. So previously, right, they're in the direct view of the balcony, and now they have moved to the side of the building, which is no longer in view of the balcony.
Oh, man.
Asher can still hear them, but he cannot see them. Okay? So 20 minutes after that point, after them being on the side of the building, Chris comes back upstairs to the apartment by himself. Once he gets inside the apartment, he introduces himself to Russell.
Okay.
And Russell, Jessica, and Asher, of course, are like, where's Typhenie?
Yeah.
Why are you up here by yourself? Chris says, oh, she got in the car with somebody and drove off. And then he grabs a few of his things and he walks out of the door. The three of them are left confused and wondering where the heck Typhenie is, because Chris's story, number one, doesn't make sense. And how come she hasn't come upstairs? Why would she leave with somebody? And how come she hasn't come downstairs? Go ahead.
No. What? Okay, well, this whole story is full of just naive individuals. I would have ran downstairs.
Sure.
After the whole situation, especially if my sister's down there.
Sure.
And she jumped in the car with a random person.
According to Chris. That's
Chris.
Yeah. So
And
they
then
all
he
start.
leaves.
So they all start calling. Okay. So Chris has walked out, and they all start calling and texting Tiffany's phone, but she's not answering. So after about 15 minutes of not getting an answer from Tiffany's phone, Asher and Russell go downstairs. First, they see Tiffany's keys are still on top of her car, where she and Chris were initially talking, but there's no Tiffany.
Okay.
So then they head to the side of the building where Chris and Tiffany had moved when they were out of sight. And when they get over there, they see Chris still there. And he's not just standing there. He's actually backed his Ford Taurus truck up on the grass next to the building, and his driver's side doors, both the front and back, are open. And he appears to either be looking in the trunk or doing something back there. The two of them, Asher and Russell, don't announce themselves. They're just kind of like peeking. And instead of going over there, they decide to circle back to another side of the building in hopes to kind of get a better view, right, of what Chris is doing back there. But by the time they circle to go to the other side, Chris is seen pulling out of the complex. So by the time they've gone over there, it's been enough time that he is now pulled out of the complex. So Asher walks over to the area where Chris and his car were, and he sees Tiffany's phone and one of her socks. And remember, one of the articles that I had said that she walked out, she didn't have her shoes on. So they see one of her socks and they see her phone.
To understand you, on the side of the house, there's nothing.
It's an apartment building, but
of the apartment building. There's no cars. It's just land. So he pulled his car up.
Right. That's the way it's described, is that it's grass, and so he's pulled his truck up onto the grass.
Okay. So there's no reason for him to be on the side of the building.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what happens next, according to the court documents that I read, is that Asher calls Chris and he says, quote, "This doesn't look good. You better get back here right now." To which Chris responds, "It sounds like you're blaming me for something." He then tells him, "I'm going to come back. I'm only like a block away." So after about 15 minutes of waiting for Chris to come back, Asher calls him back because he's not there yet. He calls him back, and Chris tells him that he had just been pulled over, so he needs to hang up. "I need to get off the phone with you. The police just pulled me over, so give me a second."
No, man.
Asher and Russell go back upstairs to the apartments, and they fill Jessica in on everything that's happened. And she ends up calling the police.
There you go.
Court documents report that police arrived to the apartments around 11 p.m. And they instruct Asher to call Chris again. But this time, once Chris answers, they take the phone. The police are like, "We want to talk to him." The police take Asher's phone and tell Chris he would be listed as a suspect in a missing persons case and that he needs to return immediately. About 40 to 45 minutes later, after the police have told him he needs to come back, and a total of 90 minutes since he originally left out of the apartment complex, Chris finally pulls up, and he's sweating profusely. So the officers take note of the 64-degree temperature outside and ask Chris about his sweating, because it's pretty cool, and you are sweating profusely. Chris says, "It was hot in my car. That's why I'm so hot, and that's why I'm sweating."
This man done went and dug a hole.
Well, we'll see. When Chris returns, he has on the same clothing, except Asher reports that the white T-shirt that he had underneath his flannel earlier is missing. It's not, he doesn't have it on anymore. It's also worth noting here that per Google Maps, it should have taken Chris 20 to 25 minutes to get to his parents' house, which is where he was living. And then that amount of time for him to get back to the apartment.
Yeah.
But of course, we're talking 45 minutes from when the police told him, and then a total of 90 minutes since he left the first time. Chris voluntarily talks to officers, and they are asking him questions. And at one point, officers ask him why he parked his car near the dumpsters. And here's the thing. The dumpsters are actually nowhere near the grassy area where he actually parked.
Okay.
And so you'd suspect that they were trying to see if he was going to lie or not, because they're just kind of asking him that, but he never actually did that. The officers check the dumpsters, and there's no loose trash or any of the things that he says he was cleaning out. None of that is evident in the dumpsters because, of course, he had never parked there. He was actually on the grass. There's only trash bags in the dumpsters.
So the police just made that scenario up
Yeah,
to see
I'm
if he
assuming,
was...
based on what I was reading, I'm assuming they're just kind of like baiting him to see if he's going to be lying.
Okay.
So they continue their line of questioning, and next they ask for permission to search Chris's car, and he agrees. They actually don't find anything in the car, and then they try and call the station to try to verify, because remember he told Asher that he had gotten pulled over. So the police are like, okay, well, let's verify that. So they call the station and ask about him being pulled over, and there's no record of any officer having pulled Chris over.
It ain't.
So officers decide to read Chris his Miranda rights and also confront him with the tread marks in the grassy area that match his car, to which he says, okay, all right, literally, right? So officers, again, at this point, circle back to his sweating. Basically, they're trying to see if they could get him to admit to anything having to do with Typhenie. And while he never admits to anything with Typhenie, one interesting thing he did do that officers took note of is instead of saying Typhenie's name during that conversation, he only refers to her as that girl, which in court docs, investigators say is a key thing to listen for when people are telling stories. It's like a way for suspects to try to distance themselves from victims or potential victims. They like remove the personalization or like relationship that they have and just say like that girl. Or in this instance, that girl.
Okay.
It was also clear that he was more interested in what was going to happen to his car versus like finding Typhenie. So officers decide to arrest Chris that night.
Good job.
So about 7 a.m. the next day, officers drive out to Chris's parents' house, again, which is where he also lived. And when they arrive, they find a camisole shirt, so like an undershirt, a black bra, a white tank top, and a smartwatch with a broken clasp, as well as a man shirt. All of the items that they found, they were able to like loosely tie to Typhenie and to Chris.
Okay.
And Chris's parents said that they had never seen the items and they were unsure of why they were in their backyard. So they're like, the police are like, we found these things in your yard, and they're like, we don't know where that came from. So police never find DNA in the car or in the grassy area. And of course, there were some security cameras at the apartment, but they were not working because that's typically what happens in cases like this.
Yep.
And so what police had was basically these items, but like, where is Typhenie? No one knows where Typhenie is at this point.
So he couldn't have went too far because he only had 90 minutes.
Exactly.
So he's somewhere in this vicinity, or she's somewhere in this vicinity, because it's obvious.
He was the last one with her, and no one has seen or heard from her basically since. Yeah. So when investigators look into Chris's phone records and his location that night, it was consistent with him having gone to his parents' house, and by 11:01, he either turned the phone off or put his phone in airplane mode, and it was no longer trackable or traceable. A house in the neighborhood of his mother's shows a car, the same make and model of Chris's, pulling up around 10:06 p.m. and then leaving around 10:48. So that's like 42 minutes, okay, that he was at his mom's house.
Yep.
Chris's mom was home at the time, and she told police that he had come home, but he never came inside. She knew he was home because her dog started barking, which is, I guess, an indication something is happening.
Yeah.
But again, he never came inside the house. So news of Typhenie's disappearance kind of starts to hit the news outlets, and with Chris's arrest, his picture begins being posted in the news.
Okay.
And there's a family on the other side of town with an eerily similar story who happens to be watching the news.
No.
Yes.
Oh, man. So this guy, he's probably done did this before.
Yes. So over in Fort Worth, Texas,
Focus evil.
a woman by the name of Hadia Islam is watching the news when Christopher's picture pops up on the screen. And instantly, Hadia is taken back to 10 years ago. You see, in 2005, Hadia's little sister, Taalibah, was in a long-term relationship with Christopher.
10 years ago, he was 21. He was 21 because he's 30 something now.
He was like 35, I think.
Oh, 35.
So he would have been
25.
25. Sure. Taalibah and Chris had reconnected after graduating from high school and were well into their relationship when Taalibah discovers that she is pregnant. Towards the end of the pregnancy, when she was about 9 months pregnant, police received a disturbance call to Chris's house. And when they arrive, Taalibah, who again is 9 months pregnant at the time, says that Chris punched her in the stomach and in the head. So you can imagine the family, and in particular Taalibah's mother, did not care for Chris, okay? In fact, when Taalibah gave birth to their son in October 2005, Taalibah's mom and her sister refused to allow him to be around. They demanded he leave and stay away from their family. Regardless of the family's feelings, Taalibah continues to try and work things out with Chris. They were not living together, but were actively trying to work it out for their family and with each other. And then on Monday, January 16th of 2006, Taalibah went to Chris's house to drop their 3-month-old son off, but she never made it out. According to testimony by Chris's sister, who was referred to as R. Reveal. Reveal is their last name. And it seems like potentially she could be the one that eventually hooked up Typhenie. Remember the way Typhenie met Chris is through a sister. So it could be, I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't able to confirm that. But regardless, Chris's sister, who we're calling R. Reveal, she was home when Taalibah came to drop their son off. She says the two, this is according to the sister, she says the two, Taalibah and Chris, began fighting, and it ended up with Chris punching Taalibah so hard that she says, "I think you broke my jaw." Taalibah's best friend also reported to police that on the day Taalibah went missing, she received a phone call from Taalibah, and Taalibah is whispering to her that she was at Chris's house, and she was asking her to please come pick her up. And that was the last time anyone is reported having talked to Taalibah.
Taalibah's baby is still there, though.
Correct, her 3-month-old son.
Okay.
About 1 week later, Chris called Hadia, who again is Taalibah's sister, and says that Taalibah dropped the baby off a week ago and got in some car and never came back. He asked Hadia to please come get the baby because he couldn't take care of him. He's like, "Come get the baby. I know it's my son. I don't know where your sister went, but come get him." Hadia, of course, goes to get the son, and about 16 days after Taalibah originally went missing, Chris files a missing persons report, and he kind of says the same story. Taalibah left in some car, and she never came back.
They waited 16 days to say their sister, girlfriend, daughter was missing?
Well,
16 days.
16 days. There were no leads and no real media coverage or no massive searches for Taalibah. And Chris was never looked into as a suspect. So he left his son with Taalibah's family. He moved out of his place, and the Islams never heard from him again. They have his son, and they don't know where Taalibah is. Heartbroken and left with no answers, the Islams did what they could to find Taalibah. And so from 2006 until 2016, they wore shirts, they printed flyers, they tried to spread the word themselves. And they had no success until that day when Hadia is watching the news and she sees a glimpse of Chris on her TV.
That is crazy.
Yeah. She reaches out to law enforcement and Typhenie's family to tell them Taalibah's story. Typhenie's family had never heard about Taalibah, let alone that Chris has, at this point, a now 10-year-old son. So they join forces and they begin supporting each other. And in 2019, in August of 2019, when Chris goes to trial for the kidnapping of Typhenie, the Islams are right there. They're right there with the family, supporting them the whole way through. It was a 2-week-long case, and in it, for the first time, Taalibah's story gets told in court. After about 6 hours of deliberation, Chris was found guilty of kidnapping with intent to terrorize and sentenced to life in prison for the kidnapping of Typhenie. He will be eligible for parole in 2046. So as of today, that was for Typhenie's story. As of today, Chris has never been charged for Taalibah's disappearance. But on June 28th, 2023, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner confirms that Taalibah's remains had been found. The skeletal remains were actually found on March 2nd.
On his property.
in 2023.
On his property.
It just says near the 900 block of South Hughes Avenue in Fort Worth, Texas. It did not specify or say that it was his mom's house or anything like
or
that.
His mom's house.
Yeah. It took, the remains were actually found in March, but it took until June 28th for it to be confirmed that it was Taalibah's remains, and it was done through DNA tests.
Yeah.
So it was a total of 17 years that they had no idea what happened to Taalibah. And so now that story or her remains, everything is being investigated. So we'll see if there are charges or anything comes from her remains being found. But I guess it's really just like both of these stories are so tragic and so senseless and so unfortunate, and really serves as like a reminder of why I wanted to do the Underreported podcast, because Taalibah's story never got out, right?
Ever.
That first story never
Wouldn't
got
have
out.
known.
And that is just an example of the way that Black women's cases go underreported in the news. That's why we're doing this podcast. And so to kind of wrap it out, of course, rest in peace to both of those women.
Yep.
And all the love and prayers to their family and everyone who loved them.
So they've never found
Typhenie's remains. Nope.
Yeah. I can't talk a lot because I got 2 daughters. So
You do.
I'm going to get emotional.
We do.
I'm sorry about this whole situation. That's crazy. Dude, at a young age, he was just evil.
Yeah.
25.
And I mean, to that point, you don't know. Did he have girlfriends prior to that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many unknowns. So.
And he shouldn't even be out. They should never let him out for parole.
Yeah. Thank you for being my guest and allowing me to share the story of Typhenie Johnson and Taalibah Islam. Thank you to the audience for listening. Until next time, we'll be back with Underreported.